What's
How's
up?
everyone doing out there in TV land, internet world?
I don't address the audience enough, actually, now that I think about it. I don't break that fourth wall. But I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, better than
That's
ever.
awesome. That's awesome.
I got dynamite in
Justin,
my pocket.
you got dynamite in your pocket. Okay. All right.
My name's James. Got a pocket full of dynamite. My name's James
Okay.
Bigby.
And my name is Justin, and I like to party.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
My name is James, and I
Yes.
don't party as much as this guy.
Okay. I was gonna say, yeah, I'm the only one here that likes to party.
He loves to party. I
That's
take it.
right.
I
Yeah.
take it
Yeah.
easy. I take it
Yeah.
easy.
Yeah. But little hot rod reference for those of you at home that are playing along with us.
If anybody out there is a fan of 2000s DVD comedies,
Mm,
Hot
mm,
Rod's a good one to have in the
right,
rotation for
right,
sure.
right. Yeah, being nothing like being a 13-year-old, hiding or not hiding, but having a handful of unrated comedies. Your mom doesn't want to
Mm,
watch them because they're so stupid, and
right.
terrible. And you get away with a few things.
There were just those DVD comedies. I remember having a TV that had a DVD player attached to it in my room.
Mm,
So
okay, okay.
I'd like watch like if I remember correctly, it might have had a DVD and a VCR like attached to the literal television.
I remember the VHS versions. I had a friend that had one that was like it was like a VHS,
Hmm.
TV, Um, I don't know if I remember any DVD ones, but yeah, I know what you're talking.
I think I did. I maybe I could be imagining that. I could have
I don't
just
know.
been a VHS one though. But I do remember those TV VHS combos.
hmm hmm
That
hmm
was back when
Yeah,
people were like, what are we doing here? Let's just slap the VCR right on the TV.
right, right, right. They're like, why let our competitors, you know,
Yeah.
why buy two things when you want one?
And then a couple years later, when we were in college, I traded a television for a guitar in
Ooh, yeah,
college, and
nice.
it was a
Yeah,
Squire electric guitar. I traded a TV for it. Just a regular,
nice,
just one of those
nice.
regular college dorm
hmm
TVs.
hmm Yeah.
Because I because you know I don't remember getting you know much out of the television at the college. I don't it's not like we had all these different channels to watch or something.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I didn't even watch TV my first semester, I remember. And my parents, they've always done this, like, get on me about not having a TV for like
Mm,
years. They've always got like, get me a TV. Like, they've on like two different occasions have gotten me TVs, and like all the time are trying to get me to just like make sure I'm watching TV. Like, I don't
mm.
know what it is, but like they're like, why aren't you my dad's like offended, like, why aren't you watching TV? Like, what are you? Gets me like make sure I have his direct TV, now YouTube TV, login information. You watching YouTube TV? What are what are
I have a TV over here. I never watch it. Like like a girl came over here one time and we like watched Netflix on
only
it.
once. Yeah,
She
yeah,
couldn't believe how much dust was on the TV. She's like, "Your TV's covered in dust." I'm like, "I never really watch it that
right,
much."
right. She's like, like, what, how do you see through all this dust? And like, I don't. Yeah, yeah.
But to be fair, my entire apartment was covered in dust. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I'll tell you, I watch football. I watch football,
mm.
I watch sports. Yeah, so, and I don't care who knows.
And I've actually watched a couple football games this year.
Oh, okay,
Surprisingly,
nice, nice.
like usually I don't watch football games, but the thing is, I've been watching some college football games, and
Yeah,
they've been
right.
kind of
Yep, yep.
entertaining,
Mhm,
almost
mhm.
rivaling the NFL.
Right, right. I know a lot of people didn't come here for sports, but I mean,
Well, we're just giving a
I
little
I love
warm
it.
up.
I love it. No, I'm into it.
This is episode 5. We're
This is episode 5. Yeah.
kind of still working on the format. We're kind of
We don't have a
thinking,
format. We just kind of,
well, we're working on it.
yeah.
I feel
That's
that
good. That's good. That's good.
a rhythm, a pattern will develop.
For
But
sure. For
I'm
sure.
thinking, come in, couple minutes of banter, talk about this, talk about
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm.
Then we get into the meat and potatoes, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, I think at the top of next hour, I'm gonna give my betting odds for next week's
Mm, okay.
games. So um,
And
we
I
hadn't
love
talked about that before, but I just wanted you to, yeah.
and I love like one of the biggest rebrands over the last few years has been gambling.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Gambling has been rebranded
Totally
beautifully
normal.
as
Totally
yeah,
normal. No issues.
yeah.
Um,
We're gambling on sports games. Nothing crazy here.
and the thing is, if they're, say you do, have a, gambling addiction, it's really more of a personal issue. It's
Mm,
it's kind of
right.
like a case by case basis. Some
Exactly.
people they never get touched by it.
Right.
The majority, maybe
Exactly.
one
Of
would say.
course.
Yeah. So, um, the rest of them just do it kind of compulsively for fun. They can stop whenever they want.
And the weird thing about the weird thing about gambling is like an addiction where in some ways you can almost be made whole again. You you
Mm,
can win
mm.
back all the money you lost.
Okay.
And
Okay.
and and even though you spent
Yeah.
time, in some ways you're whole, you're back, you know.
Mm, maybe. Yeah.
If you win all the money back in some way, I mean,
I guess. Yeah. And no damage done. That's all it is. It's all money. It's only money at the end of the day.
yeah, right.
I think that's what the message is. Like, like there's no like indelible effect, on your like there's no uh
Right. Like, with certain, teeth aren't gonna fall out, your
it's
liver's
not
not
gonna
gonna
touch
give
your
out.
it's not gonna touch your psyche. It won't touch your soul, It's only
Right.
money,
Exactly. And you can win it back.
right?
In fact, win it back this weekend, win it back.
We're almost all kind of the reverse of Dorian Gray. Dorian Gray's face never altered, but the portrait of him aged, terribly.
Mm.
We're almost we're the opposite. We imagine that the portrait of us is just perfect all the time, even though this just ages.
Mm.
Or gambling and maybe
Addiction and
alcohol or
alcoholism and
anything, opiates, well, who knows.
mm, you know that's interesting. That is interesting because we always kind of have a clear idea of our like a we have this idea of ourselves as being kind of, I don't know, pristine.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, and that's kind of, to the point of like, you can kind of make yourself whole. You can just win your money. You can win all the money back and then just walk away from the
Right.
table and just be done with it. You're fine.
But I do feel like gambling is sort of unique in that because I don't know, you're in some ways, with alcoholism, you're almost, the alcohol is drank, it's gone. You know what I mean?
Maybe, maybe there's an argument that, when, uh, your brain kind of makes a connection, but when you have that reward center, because of the winnings, in that way, it may not appear, to the eye that you've changed, but maybe you've changed physically in that regard. Um,
Could be. Like your impulse control has been
mhm.
damaged.
Yeah, like you're just the neural networks of your mind have just altered just even that much.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. Well,
But hey,
hey, gambling
great rebrand.
addiction.
No, you're totally right. No, I mean and hey, addiction. Who knows? I'm no expert on these things. This is
Consult your physician, boys and
right. Yeah,
girls.
that would be a funny thing if they had that on the commercials. Consult your physician, but DraftKings. Yeah.
And remember, boys and girls, if you find yourself compulsively consuming different substances, consult your physician.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong. We just go to the doctor. That's it.
We kind of, yeah, we almost have like this, we think of like substances that we consume, like compulsively, like that, there's an issue with that, right? But then, if you like sort of compulsively consume like maybe information, then
Mm.
we don't really think of, we don't like kind of put those on the same level. But maybe that's when we talk about people getting in um, uh, feedback
Like
loops, in those like echo chambers
echo
on the internet.
chambers, yeah,
Yeah.
feedback loops. They're like there's like a compulsion with the participating in the sort of tweet storm type
Mm-hmm.
thing.
Yeah,
You know,
for
there
sure,
there
for
could
sure.
there could there could be an argument made for that, but
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
I think we are sort of fixated on substances currently. But maybe,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
they do talk about information diet. Don't they describe
Mm.
social media
Yeah, no, I have heard
consumption
that.
almost like
That is true.
a diet?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That is
Yeah,
that
that is true.
that's that sort of parlance is relatively new.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. But it is out
Maybe
there.
over the last 3 to 4 years, I think.
Yeah, yeah. But I
But
mean, that's the thing. We kind of have to go through things to learn them. But
that
yeah,
could be a
which
beneficial mindset to have as we move forward into the 21st century. I could see
yeah,
that
yeah.
behooving some individuals.
Yeah, and I mean, speaking of that, I mean that kind of goes to our poet Kay Ryan this week, learning things,
Kay Ryan, what a
going
treat.
things to learn them. It's almost
Mm.
like every little poem of hers is like a little aphorism. It's like a little factoid of
Yeah,
life.
she'll take like a concept or something that just seems a little like maybe something that would be in a children's book and just sort of give it a little couple verses, the
Hmm.
little
Hmm.
it's almost like a
Yeah.
little treat, a little
Hmm. Hmm.
she Kay
Yeah.
Ryan, if you read like several of her poems, she'll almost seem like a maybe like a Santa Claus or like a Willy Wonka, leaving behind like
Hmm.
little poetic treats
Hmm.
for
Yeah.
you to
Yeah.
sort of they're sort of fun little poetic treats.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's not the poem I chose this week, but going from that, she has one ideal audience that sort
Mm.
of speaks to that. And I meant to look it up, but I believe Emily Dickinson has a poem like it as well. But an ideal audience, she's basically saying that, she's not writing for, maybe, scattered legions or, you know, five cousins or, something, but, just one, who's also been to this room. Maybe they're not even alive today, but, they'll, someone who's been in this space who maybe some distant future will read and know where she's coming from as well. Has been to
Mm.
that place, and so yeah, it is kind of like almost like leaving little breadcrumbs behind. It's almost like it's like a mind, it's like a psyche that's just you know kind of sort of documenting their way through life through these truths and leaving little uh, little breadcrumbs for you to find.
Mm. That is interesting. And one thing, like it's been commented that Kay Ryan, she doesn't use a lot of I in her poet. Like she doesn't use a lot
Mm-hmm.
of first person in her poetry. Um,
Okay.
so since there's not a lot of first person, there's not a lot of use of the first person in her poetry. It kind of creates this sort of state where like the mind is almost interchangeable, or like the point of view is almost interchangeable.
Mm,
So she's
that's
writing
interesting.
about so not only is she writing about things we can find in children's books, but also like, maybe the wind or like, a lightning strike or
Hmm.
just
Hmm.
little things and, connect them with little colloquialisms. Basically, the bottom line is her poetry isn't necessarily so confessional.
Mm,
Um,
mm, mm.
Not
Okay.
necessarily
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
confessional, but still definitely has a bite to it.
Mm, mm. Yeah. Um, something with her, I always think of it as like being like really, I think of her as being like really technical, and I remember I got to see her a couple times at, Francis Marion uh, speak and, read, um, which was awesome. And but I remember her describing it as like recombinant rhymes, and that's kind of almost what I think of as like just almost like she has these tight, lines, and uh, these different combinations of word sounds, of different sounds that just kind of they almost fit together like blocks,
Mm.
that like feed through, through the poem. It's yeah, I think kind of a she definitely has like a unique style in that regard,
Her
and
her
she
poet
definitely sticks to it. Yeah.
her poetry is often in free verse, so those recombinant rhymes almost create like a scaffolding, a bit of
Mm,
sort of a bit of order in her
it
the
does.
free verse of her poetry, and the rhymes really, and they could be they could be considered slant rhymes or off rhymes, but they not only do they rhyme, are they slant rhyme, are they off rhyme, but they're often like rhythmically coherent as well.
Mm,
So just a fantastic poet who kind of approaches poetry a little different than some of the poets
yeah.
that we've had in the past.
Yeah, it definitely like flows, and she like for anyone who hasn't read her, every one of her poems is she has her own style. Like she writes in that style. Like I haven't read anything from her that wasn't, you know, really tight, short lines, Um she's not someone who like has like a range of styles. Like there's some it's not a it's it, I enjoy it. I appreciate it. But that is a feature of her writing, is that she has her own kind of style, and she sticks kind of firmly to it. Um, but yeah, she's always been one of my favorites. So one quick thing I had learned from listening to her read was she said that she liked to try and make every day the same. And um, in that regard, if you keep everything the same, then you can kind of, in life you have like these like really high highs, really high lows. You go through these sort of mountains. If you can kind of make everything the same, then maybe a little molehill, you can actually pinpoint that, and be able to look at that, because you keep everything the same. So when
Mm.
you naturally do go through some highs and some lows, you can really kind of look at them, um, which I kind of I took that to heart. I kind of tried to even mimic that in some regard. I've even to today tried, kind of mimic that in some regards. Um,
Mm.
yeah, she's always been kind of she's an influential one.
Yeah, she is an influential one. She was also the poet laureate. I'm pretty
Yep,
sure, just coincidentally, I think she succeeded Charles Simic.
I think so. I think that sounds about right. Yeah,
And then just coincidentally, her episode is after the Charles Simic episode.
coincidentally, completely coincidentally.
So she's a very she's a decorated poet. I definitely would consider her, definitely into the postmodern. I can definitely kind of put her into the postmodern poetry. Um, just a lot of the postmodern sort of wave can be seen as maybe having some oxymorons. And one thing that seems maybe a bit oxymoronic about Kay Ryan is she sticks to her style of free verse. You know, her style is sort of a free verse, but she sticks to that style. So and also with the recombinant rhyming, sort of it is sort of, dare I even say, maybe a bit of a hip hop approach to the rhymes.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
Not necessarily being so focused on just the end rhyme, you know. And
Hmm.
obviously,
Hmm.
early hip hop was sort of more focused on the end rhyme, but K Ryan started getting popular in the '90s and into the 2000s. So
Hmm.
I
Right.
feel
Yeah.
like that's
Yeah.
it's
She
almost
was a
kind
bit
of a
of a late bloomer.
lyrical hip hop, hip hop to her rhyme scheme. Sometime.
Yeah. I remember her saying something along the lines of her being like in her 30s when she kind of maybe like 30 or 31 when she decided like, okay, this is what I'm gonna do.
Mm.
So she's a bit, she was a little bit older because I think she was born in 45 and it was getting
Mm.
popular in the 90s and 2000s. So yeah, I'm pretty sure she was already in her like 50s, 60s, kind of similar to Robert Frost. And I think her work is in some way reminds me of Robert Frost in some ways. Um, and I recall her saying that she kind of tried to write because I remember there like the way they would do it at Francis Marion, it was like this they have a kind of a literary festival. They have a handful of authors there, and they would have a few different readings, throughout the weekend, and they would pair different authors together, each time basically, and they'd have like a one off where it was just them, and then they'd pair them off. So I remember her being with an author that was talking about writing, from a certain perspective, of life, sort of kind of taking an intersectionality sort of approach, and Kay Ryan kind of saying like, well, no, I mean, I try to write for kind of, more or less like more all of humanity in a way, kind of
Mm.
in a more of a timeless way. Just trying to be a great writer rather than like say, a great female writer. Um, and I think that kind of timeless quality sort of shines through and why it does seem like it's like, nursery rhymes or, it's not nursery rhymes. That's like, but why it seems like it could be like a kid's book, as you're saying, at times.
Yeah, yeah. At times it can have that kind of be like a children's book, and at times I kind of made allusion to kind of have a kind of a hip hop quality with some of the recombinant rhymes. But also, I think I remember reading that one of her first books was self published. So
Right. Yep. Her
so
first one was, yeah.
self published recombinant rhyme schemes. It's kind of a bit hip hoppy to me. Also,
DIY.
a bit DIY, hip hop, postmodern kind
Hmm.
of endeavors, and it paid off big because it got her all the way to the White House in '08 with Obama.
Yeah.
So
All the way to the white. You went to the top.
when she took it all the way to the top.
Yep. 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 Yeah.
And something else I found interesting about Kay Ryan, she was said that she was the first lesbian to be the poet laureate,
Interesting.
but her poetry I wouldn't necessarily, even if you were, if there was a distinction between, I guess you could say, LGBT poets versus LGBT poetry, I wouldn't necessarily consider her poetry to be, centered on her sexuality or centered on who she is as like a woman or any sort of
Hmm.
intersectionality, just because, like I said, she rarely uses the first person pronoun I. That's rarely used in her poetry. So even though it was of note that she was the first lesbian poet laureate, her poetry is sort of very expansive, very very sort of approachable to anyone, almost of any time.
Yeah. I think that, yeah, that kind of speaks to her trying to write something maybe that's a bit more timeless
Right,
or just,
timeless.
more written from a, it's almost like this is just this is human poetry.
That's
Um,
and for that reason, she reminds me of Emily Dickinson.
yes, yeah, that's kind of I think of her as sort of like a almost like a combination of Frost and Dickinson.
Okay, yeah, because of her, because Emily Dickinson wrote a very human poetry, you know. But Emily Dickinson had more, was more strict with her structure, obviously. Writing
Yeah, yeah, she wrote her.
a lot of
Yeah,
sonnets. But Kay
well, and that.
Ryan, well, yeah,
No, no, go
Kay,
ahead.
yeah, Kay Ryan, she has her own style that she sticks to, but she writes very human poetry, very humanist
Hmm.
poetry.
Yeah, yeah, no, and yeah, that's something that I kind of appreciate too, and also remember her saying that she just tries to do just write the next poem. That's like her only goal is just to
Mm.
write the next poem. Every day she tries to write a poem, and that's her only goal is just to write one poem, and like you just focus on writing one, and
Mm.
like that's kind of so hard to do. Like if you just try to, it's hard to write a poem every day. Like
Yeah,
like
it is.
and even it's hard to just write one. You think like, oh, I'm gonna write like a book of poetry. You
Mm.
just write, just try and write one. Just try and write one poem. It's like, oh, you want to have an album? Why don't you make one song? That's tough.
It's hard to write
Yes, yes.
because as soon as because and it's easy to dream. It's easy to start dreaming.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
You
mm-hmm.
know,
Yes, yes.
but but lucky for us, Kay Ryan has done a lot of writing.
Mm-hmm. I don't think there's any issue with me drinking wine on the podcast, is there?
I guess we'll find out.
Yeah.
I
Probably
would
lose
have
our
just
sponsors.
let them think that you like to put fruit juice in nice glasses.
Well, and that's the thing is that this is grape juice, but I was like, they're gonna think this is wine. Is there gonna be any issue if they think I'm drinking wine? Which is why I asked.
No, the only issue may be they say that you're being pretentious.
Hmm. Right? Because if I was like, yeah, I'm drinking a Spanish Garnacha, people are like, Jesus Christ, this guy. Yeah.
What poem did you choose?
Yeah. So, I have a smaller one today, and a lot of her poems are smaller. But from the Niagara River here, um,
Hmm.
winner of the Ruth Lilly Poetry Prize. Um, I have Reverse Drama,
Okay,
which
reverse
is a
drama.
fun one. Yeah,
Reverse drama. Let me get it up
yeah.
on the screen.
You
I
want?
guess without further ado, we'll
Yeah.
go ahead and get
I'll
going.
yeah. I'll wait for you to get that on the screen, and then I'll uh, you know,
How about that?
yeah. Okay, there we go. There we go. All right. So, Reverse Drama by K. Ryan. Lightning, but not bright. Thunder, but not loud. Sometimes something in the sky connects to something in the ground in ways we don't expect and more or less miss except through reverse drama. Things were heightened, and now they're calmer.
Hmm.
And hopefully I didn't pause too much on those lines at the end of those lines, but that's a small one, and I think that very much goes into some of the what we were saying before, kind of the aphoristic sort of quality of
Right,
her poetry.
right.
Um, this one has, and you know what, for our audience, these are actually longer lines. These are some of the longest lines I've seen K. Ryan write.
Mm,
Um, these lines, yeah, these are on the longer end of K.
for
Ryan.
sure.
Maybe the longest I've seen. That's maybe an exaggeration, but they're longer. But what this one really brings to mind though, and we're kind of going back to, trying to make every day the same. This reminds me of the Tao. this is almost like this could almost be in the Tao. You know, those first two lines,
Yeah,
lightning but not bright, thunder but not loud. I mean, the whole. I mean, this is like the Tao. You know,
yeah.
sometimes something in the sky connects to something in the ground. I mean, that could be. I mean, we could just be reading the Tao right now. I don't know. Maybe she,
It
copied
could
this
be,
one and I didn't realize it.
we could be reading the Tao, but then it almost sounds almost like Dr. Seuss a bit or something, you know?
A little bit. I mean, because there are, she plays with sound, and I mean, it's very technical. I mean, this one there are a little bit closer to end rhymes. You know, when you
Mm,
have the connects, and these are like you were saying before, like slant rhymes. They're kind of near rhymes. It's really more. It's really more about the sound, which is also why it's always important to read these things aloud. So, connects, expect, accept, you know, the drama, calmer, drama and calmer don't necessarily rhyme together, but when I say in more or less miss accept through reverse drama, things were heightened and now they're calmer. You
mm,
hear it still though,
right.
I'm tempted to almost say calm, like calmer, drama and calmer.
Mm,
Um, and but again, kind of going with that Taoist, and this is almost like a little like lesson in Buddhism, or in Zen,
mm,
this little poem here, and it almost like it takes something in that happens like in life in sorry in the sort of the drama of our days, and kind of distills it through like a little, it's like a little lesson almost,
mm,
so we're saying, lightning but not bright, thunder but not loud, like what is it, this lightning but not bright, thunder but not loud. Sometimes something in the sky connects to something in the ground, that loud and ground. And what is this? What is this? We're trying to point to something. We're kind of trying to, we're sort of, through those contradictions, through those like dichotomies, we're kind of we're honing the picture in on what we're looking at,
mm-hmm,
you know. Um, and so, uh, it, sometimes in life, and so, some just, sorry, connects to something in the ground in ways we don't expect, and more or less miss. How many times in life, something, in our lives, connects to something we almost like kind of know, something that comes from the sky, something that, we learn a lesson in life. Maybe there's something that, we've gone through, or, maybe we learned a lesson as a kid, or like heard a story or something, and then we had to live it out, 15 years later, and then be like, oh, what, this is
mm,
like that thing that that,
right.
I should have known this, but you have to experience it physically. This is almost like sometimes something in the sky. This is something immaterial. Connects with something in the ground. It's lightning but not bright. It's like I have a poof of uh sort of maybe intuition.
Mm,
It's lightning but it's not bright.
right.
Maybe something is deafening. Maybe something hits me and I'm like, oh shit, it's thunder, but it's not loud, right? Um, so, they connect though, these things, this immaterial and material, they connect in ways we don't expect. It doesn't, uh, you may learn a truth like what comes up must go down, but you don't realize that it's going to be stock prices, and you think trees are going to grow to
Mm,
the sky until, you've lost your ass, and so it's then you're like, oh yeah, what goes up must come down. That's true for all things. um, you know these connect in ways we don't expect, and more or less miss, except through reverse drama, the going on of our lives, through, um, my time, studying under the great Ram Dass, learning, it's all drama, right? We almost, it's only through reverse drama, sort of reversing the process, almost maybe doing nothing, you know. Maybe it's meditation, maybe it's kind of, sort of trying to peel back the layers a little bit, you know. And then in doing that through the reverse, now we're able to see the ways in which, that's something in the sky connected to something in the ground that we weren't able to see before. But we had to kind of, we had to do the opposite. We had to, we that happened through drama, so we had to go through this reverse drama. Um, Things were heightened and now they're calmer. You go through the, tumultuous, what is life? What it's the Hamlet soliloquy,
Mm,
where, to suffer the slings of arrows,
right.
uh, is that life? Um, um, through yeah, through that reverse drama, we're at a height when we're, feeling the slings and arrows. What is it? Of fortune?
I think
I
so.
know there's a word in there I'm missing. Um, but kind of when we're calmer, we can see more. We can kind of see through that.
I kind of see
So
this
yeah,
as the point of view of this poem as being like on the back half of the back half of like the falling action. You know how you have
yeah,
rising
mhm,
action to a
mhm,
climax and then the falling
yeah,
action.
yeah,
This poem, like
mhm,
we spoke about the aphorist, like how it's kind of a bit of an aphorism in some ways. It's
yeah,
almost like a
yeah,
moral of the story, kind
mhm.
of a
It is,
tidying up
yeah,
at the end.
mhm,
Um, you
yeah,
know, there were these great heights that connected
mhm,
to maybe little old me. Maybe I saw something bigger than myself, or I was a part of something larger than myself. And but now, through the reverse, because drama is basically rising action. That
mm, mm,
drama can be construed as rising action, but now
mm,
past the
mm,
drama, things were heightened. Now they're calmer. Now it's
mhm,
almost like we're past those heights. We're past the whatever was tumultuous, and I almost have a chance to sort of put it I almost have a chance to sort of put a bow on things, and that is powerful. It almost is like lightning. It almost is like thunder, but
mhm,
it's not bright and it's not loud. It's not dramatic.
yeah, mhm, mhm, yeah, yeah. That's good. That's good. Yeah, yeah. That was a good point to tie in those first two lines there at the end. I kind of
It's
took it
almost
took it
sort
right
of
from
the
me.
almost sort of like the lesson of almost sort of like what we can learn from the calm. Maybe it is in the
Mm,
calm
mm, mm.
moments where we see that hey, there really was there was something that was sort of bigger than myself, or there were happenings that were sort
Right.
of larger than myself.
Mm, mm, that might have been connected to something else. Yeah, I think that, this comes from, you know, a poet, maybe a speaker, one who, and like I was saying before about, like breadcrumbs, we were both kind of saying it, like kind of leaving breadcrumbs behind. This is almost like coming from someone who's like is experimented on themselves, right? Like they've
Mm,
they've gone through this process, and we're kind of able to report back about it. Um, and that's that's kind of what some of these that's what many of her poems are like to me, are almost like it's like a psyche, it's like a soul that has sort of has tried some things out in life, has and is sort of reporting back what they found, more or less.
mm,
um and so sometimes it does kind of come across almost as like a little bit of a aphorism, like a little bit of a lesson, a little moral, you know.
mm. And in the same, there's something in it that is, there's something in the storm that is almost more than the storm. Because
Mhm,
there's something in the sky that connects to something on the ground in ways we don't
mhm,
expect.
mhm,
Lightning
mhm.
and thunder, they're part of the storm, they're part of the sky,
Yeah,
and they do sort of
yeah,
connect to the ground, but there's something about a storm that's more than just the lightning and the thunder. And
yeah.
there's something about a story that's almost more than the drama of the story. Um
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good point. It's they're lightning in a way is kind of chaos, you know, and so is thunder. We don't know where it's gonna hit. We ultimately can't control it. There are those who say that we can, this
right.
day and age, but maybe we can, maybe we can't. But all intents and purposes, we can't control. We can't control. The weather can't control
Right.
where the lightning's gonna strike.
Not yet
We can't control the
anyways.
thunder, how loud it's gonna be. Um, you know, Maybe we put a bunch of dry ice in it and makes it rain a whole lot or something. I don't know. I don't know.
Hmm.
I'm just making jokes, but yeah, it's sort of it's a chaotic element
Right.
that in some ways we're almost I don't know we're almost are we I mean chaos. I don't want to say we're almost a victim to it. It's not victim or it's not like
We almost kind of have to go
yeah,
through it. It almost
right, yeah,
it almost encroaches upon us. Chaos almost it almost kind of seeps into our reality.
yeah. It's more of like hey, yeah,
And
maybe there
then
is an element of it like you're gonna go through storms and it's kind of more of how you deal with it.
but
Or you might
but
not
the
be able to deal with it until you look back.
but the idea of going through a storm, that idea is almost more than the storm itself. Because when you have this reverse
Mm,
drama, it's almost like, what is reverse drama? It's almost like thinking or ruminating or something.
mm,
Because whenever
mm-hmm,
you're like
mm-hmm,
thinking, you're thinking about something that maybe was going on. You're thinking about a time when things were heightened. So to see thinking is sort of like the the cleanup after the storm. That's a great insight. Because a lot of times when you're thinking, that's exactly what you think. You're thinking, wow, things were heightened, things were going on. Now they're calmer.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And this is a great example of Kay Ryan sort of depersonalizing her poetry. She could have easily wrote this with the pronoun I, had
It's a
this in
good
the
point.
first
Yeah.
person, but no,
Right.
she
Yeah.
instead of this being about a time where she witnessed something from the sky connecting something to the ground, and she realizing that things were calmer now, she sort of expands it to all humanity, and for us all to realize
Yes.
that, wow, like
Yeah. Yep.
things were heightened in our life and now they're calmer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I think yeah, that's a good point. She could have gone into maybe personal details or what was the lightning, what is the thunder. It's more about talking about the process itself,
Mm,
rather than getting into the details of how what the details of what it looked like, because that lightning and that thunder, I mean, it's gonna be different for everyone, right? But the
right.
the fact is that it'll always be lightning and thunder.
And I mean,
Um,
and in some ways, if we had a cosmic analysis of this poem, I mean, the lightning and thunder, the chaos come from above, but maybe the
mhm,
realization sort of also comes from above. The reverse drama, things were heightened and now they're calmer. The thinking has been seen as, coming from above like a light bulb on top of the head.
mhm,
That's
mhm.
that's also seen as sort of inspiration. Like
Yeah.
ideas sort of coming from above, and and we most of the time we miss those things, except through reverse drama. Except through which I'm kind of seeing as thinking, as the opposite of
hmm
drama is
hmm
sort of thinking, ruminating, you know, and you can
Yeah.
only
Yeah.
really do that during the calm times.
Yeah. Yeah. I think of it as kind of a like Emerson. He has that idea of circles,
Mm,
and so it's almost like same as maybe like we live in duality, right? The intensity of the storm that will then coincide with maybe the length or the depth of uh, maybe thinking or rumination or meditation that one will have to do in order to
mm,
be able to fully um, maybe comprehend. And then once you do, that's kind of like a circle, and like you're able to step out of it, right?
right.
um, or like sort of, yeah, I guess, yeah, in a way
Through this
that's when it
reverse
completes,
drama, what there's
right?
a word for it. It's almost like when something sort of traumatic happens. What's the word? It's not. I don't
hmm
think the word is incorporate, but it's almost like we have to almost like synthesize what just happened.
yeah, 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 that's
In, incorporate or almost. I don't
yeah,
know. There's a word I can think it escapes. It escapes me now. But
I feel yeah, I'm because we almost know, like, if you never, like, it's like like with a breakup, if you never just you know you gotta go through the emotions, or maybe grief or something like that. You're like,
mm,
you can't just run away from it.
right,
You can't just keep on adding to the drama. Eventually you're gonna have to
distance
kind of,
yourself.
right, yeah, and experience this and feel it, and then so that you can kind of come to sort of terms with it.
Right, almost synthesize,
Yeah,
incorporate. There's a different
right,
word
yeah.
though, but it's basically
Right. No,
that.
I know. I almost, yeah, I know you'd said it incorporated earlier. I almost repeated it as well. But I know what you're getting at. I think you're right in it, but I'm not sure the word.
Right, right, yeah. But
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that's reverse drama. I mean, I mean, this is, I could have picked any number of them. I tried to, I tried to pick
this
something.
is
Yeah.
prototypical.
Yeah.
This is a. I'm not going to say a typical K. Ryan poem, but it's definitely prototypical. Like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
this one actually may be a bit wordier than some of her other ones.
Perhaps. Yeah. Perhaps.
Even a bit more dramatic, I'd say. She has some that are really lighthearted. She
Mm-hmm,
definitely
mm-hmm.
has some poetry that is very lighthearted. But yeah, this is yeah, I like the poem. I actually had not read this one before
hmm
you mentioned it, but yeah, I
Yeah,
did like that
that
poem.
yeah, that was actually, I tried to pick one that, because I know I've sent you some over the years and you've read a few of them, and I have some other favorites, but I tried to pick one that was something new for us.
Mm.
Yeah,
She also had the one about the chickens coming home to roost, right?
love that one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
Home to
chickens coming home.
Roost.
There's one about the crocodile tears that she has
Yeah,
that I love.
yeah,
It's something like I can almost say it from memory. It's like the the one sincere crocodile's eyes have gone dry for years. What's the point in crying crocodile tears? It's just she just took like an old phrase, crocodile tears, and was like,
yeah.
well, what if there
I
was
did,
what if there was a crocodile that was sincere? You know?
right, right, right. Yeah. No, I do appreciate, that's a quality of her poetry that I appreciate, is like she almost like gets it, picks a phrase or picks like a little, something, and just like kind of teases it out,
Right,
and,
right, right.
and I really appreciate, and something I didn't say earlier. Her poetry is like something, it's like for people who enjoy puzzles, I think. Like if you like
Mm,
puzzles and like, that's what I think of like her recombinant
mm,
rhyming. It's almost like little like puzzles, you know, that you can kind of sort of put together,
right.
um, that I appreciate. But yeah, she's actually put out some poems this year. I read some from her that she had published this year.
Really?
Yeah, still
In
going.
a book?
I want to say it was in Revel, in
Mm.
a lit mag. Yeah.
Oh yeah, she has a bunch that were in magazines and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But the poem I picked is it's from her 1994 book Flamingo Watching.
Mm,
So it is
yeah.
a 30 years old. The poem I picked is A Certain Kind of Eden.
Yes, it's great.
A
Yeah,
Certain
love
Kind
this.
of
Love this
Eden
one.
by Kay Ryan. And I actually had you read this one like years before?
Yeah, yeah. When I think when in college when she had came, I went on a tear through everything that I could read of Kay Ryan's.
Okay. Okay, cool, cool. A Certain Kind of
Yes.
Eden by Kay Ryan. And I mean, I guess I'm gonna go ahead and just say shout out to Poetry Foundation.
Yeah,
We've been using their website
yeah,
this for like all these episodes. Shout out to
yep,
Poetry
yep.
Foundation. But
Yeah, I gotta say that like this might be maybe my favorite Kay Ryan poem.
really,
Yeah,
it was my
I
favorite
absolutely
as
love this.
well.
I absolutely love it.
All right,
So I'm excited. Yeah.
all right. A Certain Kind of Eden by Kay Ryan. It seems like you could, but you can't go back and pull the roots and runners and replant. It's all too deep for that. You've overprized intention, have mistaken any bent you're given for control. You thought you chose the bean and chose the soil. You even thought you abandoned one or two gardens. But those things keep growing where we put them, if we put them at all. A certain kind of Eden holds us thrall. Even the one vine that tendrils out alone in time turns on its own impulse, twisting back down its upward course, a strong and then a stronger rope, the greenest, saddest, strongest kind of hope. So that was A Certain Kind of Eden by Kay Ryan. And I love the title first off, A Certain Kind of Eden, because we find ourselves in a certain kind of Eden. We emerge into a certain world. No matter who you are, like, no matter where you're from, we sort of emerge into this we sort of emerge into these circumstances, this childhood, this adolescence, this greater hometown, this nation, this country, all like a garden in a way. It's all alive, it's all twisting and forming and growing, whether it's your parents or your hometown, your school, and we have no control over all of it. And yet we almost take ownership of it, like Adam and like kind of like Adam in the Garden of Eden. We almost start naming things and thinking that we can call things this way and that way. Maybe we even start talking to the snakes in the garden like Eve.
Mm,
But you know, the bottom line is we sort of assume that we have this control, this intention, this we assume that we have this, because God Himself gave Adam the ability to name animals. Who are we
mm,
to think that we almost have a similar sort of power? Maybe it just goes to show that we truly are Adam's children, to think of ourselves as being so full of intent and being able to express that intent so clearly. When there's no guarantee there's no guarantee that we're expressing that level of intent. And
mm-hmm.
we even kind of get to the point where we might even start to think that we are making the choices in the garden. We are choosing the bean and choosing the soil, or maybe even we choose our own hometown. And even as we get older, as we grow up, we might even think that we can even abandon a garden, you know that we can even leave a garden behind. But the idea that we can leave a garden behind, that may even be that may even be a type of wishful thinking, or a type of over inflation of, I'm not sure if it's our sense of self or our sense of what we can accomplish. But and even though, I don't want to say that we're 100% pure victims of circumstance. I like the uh i like how K Ryan phrases, we have mistaken any bit we're given for control. Like, so, maybe we're not complete victims of circumstance, but maybe we don't have the control we fancy ourselves either. We even thought of ourselves as abandoning one or two gardens, but the things that we leave behind, they still grow, they still change, even if we're the ones that put them there at all. You know, there's a certain kind of fresh, like there's a certain kind of Eden that holds us thrall. We're almost enthralled by a certain kind of helplessness or a certain kind of circumstance. Um, you know, even like, the different things and the different things that might grow around us, they grow and they grow stronger, and they kind of can start to hold us there. They kind of can start to keep kind of keep us where we are. So there's something to our helplessness as
Mm,
human beings.
mm, mm. Yeah, a lot of this I think of as almost like thoughts, like in the mind, you know,
Mm,
like this poem almost kind of like exists in the mind, or um, all like these gardens are maybe like are like maybe different thoughts that you know you can kind of if we do you mind scrolling up to the top?
oh
I want
no,
to I wish I had a
yeah, I wish it. Yeah,
it's
it's
like
about.
'cause I think of it almost like maybe thoughts or maybe thought patterns or like maybe like behaviors where like you think you can go back and pull the roots and uh it seems like you could just go and like it's like maybe we were talking about addiction earlier. It seems like you could
Mm,
just go back and pull the roots and runners and replant, but it's all too deep for that,
right.
you've overpriced intention, uh yeah, is it for like addiction? Like this could almost be, have
Yeah.
mistaken any bent you're given for control. It's like, hey, I could quit anytime I want. Um, you thought you chose that's what I've thought about it too. Like you thought you chose the bean and chose the soil. You're like, no,
Right.
I'm deciding that, I'm gonna, whatever it is,
I'm gonna
you know,
plant this, or I'm gonna plant
right.
that.
Yeah, right. You thought you were planning that. You didn't know, you had no idea. You even thought like, oh, like I've done that in life where I thought like, oh, I left this behind. Oh, I'm not doing that. And,
Mm,
yeah,
right.
right back to it. A few years later, right back to it. Uh, it could be anything too. You know,
Mm,
it could even be like um, maybe a hobby. I used to pick up. I used to work on motorcycles with my grandpa when I was a kid. Never thought that 30 years later I'd buy a motorcycle and start fixing it up and thinking about my grandpa.
right.
Yeah, you thought you abandoned that garden.
Right.
Um,
Right.
but yeah, you didn't. Uh, they just keep growing. Um, so one other thing. Remember that song by Sly and the Family Stone? There's a junkyard in the mind of a quitter.
Right.
In time, you'll get better. That it's in time. It's this song reminds me of that song reminds me of this poem, or this poem reminds me
Mm,
of that song. Talking about the things that happen like in time, where just like we think you can abandon gardens, you think you almost leave like you have all in your mind, you have all these abandoned gardens.
right.
So
But hey, but those things
yeah.
they keep growing where we put
Yes.
them, if we
Hmm.
put them there at all. Like what you're talking about
Yeah.
with your
Yeah.
grandfather, you know that
Mm, mm,
you might
mm,
think that
mm,
you might
mm.
think like, hey, I like motorcycles, but do you like motorcycles,
Yeah.
or is it,
Yeah.
or did your
Yeah.
grandfather put that in your head?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's why it's, I love it. It's a certain kind of Eden holds
Hmm.
us thrall.
Hmm. Right. Right. It's almost, yeah, it's almost like particular and individual, in a way.
Right. And as we scroll, as the the poem ends, even the one vine that tendrils out alone in time turns on its own impulse. Like, so even if there's like one thought or one part of our childhood that
Mm,
grows out, or one part of something that we can't control in our head, it might grow stronger and stronger. you know um and it is described as the greenest, saddest, strongest kind of hope. But it's like the hope of something dormant, the hope of something
mm,
growing beneath the surface. um where even though it's described as hope, it may not necessarily be a good thing when it surfaces.
right, yeah. It doesn't, yeah, of course, because it's the saddest, strongest kind of hope. Have you ever watched a time lapse of a vine growing?
Hmm.
And so that's what I kind of imagine. You see it sometimes, there will be one or two that kind of go off on their own, but they do come back.
Right.
And yeah,
Almost incorporate, like they're almost searching for something to latch onto.
right,
So
yeah,
the
exactly. But because they don't find anything, they don't go far enough to find anything, they come back.
mm,
And sometimes we do that, in life. Maybe we think we're striking out on our own, and we end up back at mom and dad's or something, or
right.
or maybe back with an ex or uh, whatever it is. Maybe I just read One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, so maybe we end up back on the ward. It's
Mm. And I
yeah.
mean, it might be like, we were talking about gambling earlier. You're talking about something, a little something in your head, that little impulse that you might not have even
Hmm.
put there is almost like a little seed growing. And by the greenest, I imagine that to mean like almost like the most alive. It's alive, it's sad, but it's very strong. Like, kind
Mm.
of, it's, and when it blossoms, and it'll almost be something that you can't control. It'll be like almost beyond your control.
It is
um
kind of it there is kind of like a sort of a little bit of a sadness. It kind of hits you in your gut a little bit, the ending, um, because I don't know. I think if anyone who's ever, and maybe I could just speak for myself, but I think it's probably true for many that if you've tried to go off on your own, or if you've tried to do something completely different, or break a habit, or you know even start a habit, and then you find yourself, back to your old ways or whatever,
mm,
and it is you sort of know how even the going back makes it stronger, you know.
mm. I
um,
I imagine the
yeah.
sadness coming from the fact that it is not our doing. You know,
Mm,
it
mm,
was almost planted in our heads. You know, it wasn't our doing. And I feel like we like to think that we are sort of choosing everything in our head, the same way we
yep.
almost would like to, we'd almost like to choose everything that's in our garden.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Like, I'm gonna
but
cultivate these kind of thoughts. I'm
but
gonna,
then that kind of begs the question: was the God of the Old Testament, was even he able to choose everything in his garden?
interesting. That's
You
an
know,
interesting.
because there definitely was a snake in the garden that
Yeah.
did that
Yeah.
didn't necessarily seem quite like everything else that was in there. So
There's always kind of like a an element of chaos.
right.
Even like with our last poem, like there will be thunder and lightning.
Mm. And technically, if we could, and like if we could give like sort of a deeper mythological reading to that whole thing, it might be something like God's mother was a great dragon of chaos that he sent to the bottom of the ocean or something. But then she sent the serpent to the garden to sort of throw things in whack, out of whack. That would be sort of like a broader mythological reading of the Old Testament. But what we have here at this poem is sort of like, you know, maybe the tendril and the one twisting and tendril vine turning on its own impulse. That sort of is almost like the serpent in the garden.
Mm.
Some like a small
Yes.
a
Yeah.
small element of or something growing. Something that has the
Mm.
potential to be, much greater, much stronger, in sort of in the garden.
Yeah.
But that is sort of like a cosmic
Yeah.
reading, though, a more
Mm.
cosmic reading of this. If I
Yeah.
could, if I could
It's an
hazard
interesting perspective.
to extend the metaphor, but but we are sort of enthralled, or we are sort of held in a certain kind of Eden. There's a certain kind of, and
Yeah.
for the poet to describe us as being in a certain kind of Eden, there, then you have, the works of like, Sigmund Freud and stuff like that to say that we almost forever exist in a certain type of childishness, or our psyche is forever in a certain type of, we're always reacting to the shattering of our innocence.
Yeah. Um, yeah. Yeah. Because it is like it's a certain kind of Eden holds us thrall as we're trying to mm, plant different gardens or leave different gardens behind. We're sort of on this search for, a kind of Eden. A sort of a kind of perfect garden. Um, that like it's like we think we're doing these things to reach that Eden. Um, even that vine that tendrils out on its own. Perhaps maybe going to what you were saying before, maybe even the impulse of that tendril, maybe it thinks it's its own impulse. It does say it's its own impulse, but maybe did it come from the tendril? Maybe that came from somewhere else that as well. Um,
Mm.
and it turns back on itself. Um, which is kind of interesting because it's almost like if it's reaching out for maybe perfection, that Eden, and it turns back on its own impulse, it's like almost like always going between maybe going for that perfection and then being like it's not nothing perfect anyways. There's like some kind of
Mm. There's that.
because
That's
like
it.
yeah.
I was gonna say there's that. That's interesting. But I was almost seeing it like, when it turns on its own impulse, it it
Mhm.
it's like it means it's like starts to go back down. It starts to kind of go back down where
Right.
this the same path that it used to go up.
Correct.
And then
Yeah.
it's like,
Right.
so it's almost like creating something that when it finally does sort of burst through the surface, it could be something that has sort of devastating ramifications.
Mm. What do you
and
mean by it?
are like, maybe not necessarily when it bursts through the surface or when it comes to fruition or when it sort of finally gets a hold of something, it'll be consequential. It won't be something like, you know it won't be something that'll be like easily dismissed, like, oh, I like cooking just because, I would cook with my mother when I was growing up. I think it's going to be something, I think it's something a bit darker, could come to the surface, or maybe a bit stronger. Like it might
Mm,
be, like we've talked about earlier, an addiction or something dealing with poor impulse control or something like that.
yeah, I guess I'm like thinking of it. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I
And I,
think it does maybe. Yeah. I guess when you were saying burst through the surface, I was just kind of curious if you were meaning like. I was just curious about what you meant by that.
by burst through the surface, I meant, become evidenced in behavior, but
Right, right, right.
go from like into the mind to outward into the behavior. But
Yeah.
that was sort of my fault, not to double the metaphor. To
Uh-huh,
stick to the
uh-huh,
same metaphor. A better example would be to, like, get stronger and stronger until
uh-huh.
till the vine couldn't be broken. If you get snared in it, you won't be able to sort of wrest yourself from it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, because it's like a little bit with thinking about, yeah, I mentioned Ram Dass before. Um, and thinking about like how sometimes maybe if you because like maybe that tendril that went off on its own, like it wasn't quite like it wasn't quite ready. That wasn't the place to, try and go and grab something out, like it wasn't time for that, right? And like so because you have to kind of like double back, you almost kind of like strengthen the tie to something, it's like if you feel like, gosh, I gotta have a glass of wine at the end of each day. It just helps me, with my stress, if I have a glass of wine. And then you're like, you know what? I'm not gonna drink wine each day. I'm not gonna have my glass of wine today. I'm gonna go off on my own. I don't need it. And
Mm.
then it's like 2 days later, you're like, I'm gonna have to have two glasses of wine tonight.
Right.
And then it's like, now it's like that thought, that sort of garden, that vine of, I need to have a glass of wine in order to relax at the end of the night. It could be anything. Um,
Mm.
and now that sort of thought pattern, that attachment is now made even more firm. Um, because of having to double back, making
Okay.
a strong and then a stronger rope.
Okay. I can also see that too.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. I think with these poems, I mean there's so many ways to look at it.
Right. It could
Yeah,
be, the sort of the well-worn like the stronger rope could be sort of the well-worn path of constantly trying to reach for something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I find it interesting with this too, because it's like like there's a certain kind of Eden that holds us thrall, and I'm wondering like even the gardens that we thought that we abandoned, if we chose them at all, um, even those were started with Eden in mind. But there's like almost like obviously they fell short of that, right? Because then we
Mm.
had to plant a new garden, you know, um, to try and get to Eden, um, that kind of stopping and starting and kind of trying to reach this place of like, maybe can we ever get there? I don't know.
Mm. Well, maybe not. That gets into sort of chasing the ideal. you know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
or
Yeah.
is the ideal a real destination or merely something that we can use to orient ourselves, you know?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Do you just let the gardens that you have grow on their own? I mean, because they grow either way.
Right. Do you understand that your
You know, that's
garden will never be that garden? That's why, you know, it's a kind of hope, you know?
mm, mm,
Or I don't know.
yeah. Yeah. I wonder too. Like you could even say maybe even it's about creativity. Like you don't have to maybe be afraid of like oh when I grow up I won't be like creative or something like that. If I get a job, if I get a wife, if I have kids, if I won't maybe
Right.
but maybe these things keep on growing anyways.
Mm.
Maybe the create maybe it's always there.
And maybe it wasn't even something that you did necessarily.
Yeah, perhaps. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
It's something that's almost in you, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And also, like we always get better at things. That's kind of like a gift and curse of humans. We get
Hmm.
better regardless. We do things better. We figure out how to do it better no matter what it is.
Right.
It could be it could be anything. Like you get it down as a habit, as a routine. That's like efficiency is like our thing. Like even your brain, like the neurons, like the paths as they get stronger, they'll just make it more and more streamlined for you to be able to get to what you're trying to get to. Like
Right.
you can build like really like ingrained deep roads sort of in your mind in a way. Um, and in a way I feel like this poem maybe speaks to that, but um, maybe those things are kind of always going on, even if we think we might be trying to direct some of these processes, but maybe they're directing us, or maybe they were there
Hmm.
you know before we even knew it.
Right.
I don't know. That's it. Yeah. I don't know. Just yeah. That's the great thing about these poems, though, or about
Yeah.
poetry. You just get to talk about stuff that's
There's no
you know,
right, no wrong.
ineffable.
Right. How do you describe the indescribable?
Right. Yeah.
Maybe, I mean, in some ways, some people would say that's what poetry's trying to do.
I mean, hey, that's Adam's job. We're talking about Eden. Adam's
Right.
job in Eden was to name the animals, to name creation, to put words to um, what he saw, to what he experienced.
To organize, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Almost
It's
like
almost,
yeah,
it's almost like,
categorize, catalog.
it's almost like God did 95% of the organizing and he wanted Adam to do the last little 5%.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, because God, I mean, he's the true artist, right? He's like Kurt Cobain when he's like, I don't know what the songs mean. You tell me. I just put the words together because they sound nice.
Hmm.
God's like, look, I don't know what these things are. I just kind of I put the lions and tigers and bears together because I thought I just like the shapes and the colors. And then he's like, you tell
Well,
me what it is.
well, there's a bit of a Gnostic tradition that's like, you know, God wanted Adam to do a little bit of sort of what he did, you know? Like
Mm,
if Adam did a little organizing, then you know, it's almost like, I don't know, then it's almost like that would be like Adam showing why he's ahead of the angels and why he's ahead of the
mm.
other spiritual beings, you know? If he could
Ah,
have if he could have taken on the task of sort of naming all the animals.
interesting. Yeah, yeah. I just find it with the words him naming things. Um, in the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God. He um, spoke the word, kind of spoke the world into existence. There's kind of something with that, with words, and yeah, maybe it's an organizing, through words. He separated the waters.
Mm,
Um,
right.
so yeah, I mean that is organizing. Just as through naming uh, all the animals, sort
Well,
of.
I mean, if you look at art, art comes from the word artifice,
Uh-huh,
and the
uh-huh.
word artifice means put together well, or
Hmm.
well put
Hmm.
together. You know,
Right.
as opposed to well, I guess they saw
That's why,
arts.
yeah.
You said that's why what?
That's why I buy artisanal coffee.
Hmm. It's put together well.
Yeah.
Well, because then there's artisan,
Hmm. Hmm.
artifice to put something together well. There's arts, then there's
Hmm.
craft.
Hmm. Hmm.
Craft is
Hmm.
almost something that I feel like craft almost has a bit of a purpose as opposed to art just for art's sake. But
Yeah.
there can also be because I mean craft beer. You know,
Right.
we're not
Right.
just gonna stare at the beer. You know what I mean?
Right. Right. Yeah, it's implying that there's like some
Like we have a
thought
motive.
put, behind it. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Um, that it has some sort of structure. Right.
But
Um,
something like art, we just enjoy. Especially fine art. You know, it's just meant to be enjoyed on its own sake for its own sake. But there's also
yeah.
things that
I mean,
are sort of artistic, like you could have like you could sculpt pillars into statues and have those statues hold up the building. But that is like art, but it's not like fine art, because it still is utilitarian.
yeah. I mean, it's an expression of the soul. I think in its best forms, art is an expression of the soul. Um, and I think that's where poetry, when it's in its best, and I think Simic was like this. I think all the poets that we've probably talked about have been this way. That's why I kind of push back on some writers if I'm being introduced to them as being like voices from a particular um, tribe of people,
Yeah, I can see that.
because it's when it's done as if it's just an expression of the human soul dealing with a human condition, sort of regardless of what condition that it's experiencing. I feel like that's when like art touches on things that um, can that transcend time and space. Um, you read something that's from a few hundred years ago, and it's like it could have been written today. You feel like you're talking to someone who's you know they're like, how did they, you read something, you're like, it's so applicable to today's times. This person is a genius.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Are they, or is it, are we, or is the human condition, are we just in this ever-present moment? And so if you read anything or experience any kind of piece of art that was, crafted in that in a sort of in a timeless sort of manner, then it'll always seem like they're talking about today. They'll always speak to you. Um,
They're talking about the eternal present sort of thing.
right, right. Um, so yeah, love. One of the that's what keeps me coming back to poetry. Over the years.
Mm. You know, I I I can agree. The thing that keeps me coming back to poetry is the art of it. It is well
Hmm.
done.
Hmm.
It is
Right,
well done.
right. Yeah, yeah,
There are people out there who do it exceptionally well.
yeah. Right. I saw one definition. I can't remember who said this, but I know that people, you know, it's like poetry is the best words in the best order.
Mm.
That's like one definition of poetry, and I think in some regards that is correct. There's a craft to it. Um,
It's put
it's
together
something that
well.
right. It's put together well, um, and there's something about words that can just because even if you paint, you're thinking in words. Maybe they
Mm.
think in colors. Maybe they do. Maybe like Billie Eilish, doesn't she smell in colors or something like that?
I have
Maybe
no idea. I have no idea.
there's something, yeah,
She has
like started this whole,
synesthesia,
yeah, the whole synesthesia thing.
but
And perhaps,
maybe
perhaps.
I don't know. But sometimes do poets think in words?
I think all people, I think humans do. I think there's something about language, symbols, even if it's colors, it's symbolic, and we experience the world and we put it into symbols in order to understand it. I think that's just what our brains do.
Mm.
Um, and
I'm trying to wonder.
yeah,
Do I think in words,
I
or
mean,
do I
what do
put
you think?
words?
How do you, yeah, you just have like sort of random thoughts, like you don't have, there's no words attached to them, and then you talk about them.
I think I just maybe I sort of have like impulses or intimations, or maybe I make analogies in my head. I think I have images maybe in my head more than words. I think if I could be honest, I think I put words to images.
You don't talk to yourself in your head at all. You don't have like a constant sort of running, just the.
Hmm. Yeah, maybe that. Maybe I do have that sometimes, but I don't know if it's always constantly running. But sometimes I feel like sometimes like I'll have like a like a bit of an insight or something that might not that I have to put words to. The only reason I'm pushing back on
Oh,
what you're
sure,
saying
sure.
is there's sometimes where I and just and this does happen when I'm trying to write poetry more than when I'm just thinking. But I think that there's sometimes I have to kind of build words around sort of an intimation or a
Sure.
notion.
Right, right, sure. So
That that's
yeah, you like turn things into you turn sort of the unconscious into conscious symbolism.
but I mean, so would you? But would that not be thinking? The first part, the unconscious part, is that not thinking?
No, I don't think that is.
Or even what about becoming aware of certain heightened emotions or certain heightened notions? That's not thinking either. If you're like, man, that kind of pissed me off. Maybe that's not quite thinking either.
I mean, that's what you're kind of doing. You're like, oh man, that pissed me off.
Yeah.
You're like you put it into a symbol, like um
No, I mean I know that we do think.
yeah.
I know that we can think in words, but I was just wondering: is that all? Is thinking just the rationalize, sort of just the rationalizing? Is that thinking?
I mean, if you're saying like consciousness, I guess we'd have to just define what we're talking about when we talk about thinking. I guess
Right?
that's where
Because
we'd
I
have
don't
to get to.
because before we had this little convo, I would have thought that even like when because I've sometimes I might wake up in the middle of the night like write a song real quick, or or I might wake up in the middle of the night like humming a song.
Right.
I guess I
Yeah.
would have thought that that would be thinking as well.
Sure.
But
The putting it to the song, or what are you saying? What's the thinking?
like even just being aware of the sort of the like the little tune in your head or something like that. Like when because you
Yeah,
wake up and I've woken up and like
so that's I think like the unconscious sort of rains down into our mind in little boxes of, conscious thought. They're like words or symbols.
But that unconscious, that's not thinking.
Um, yeah, like I said, I guess we'd have to define thinking.
It's
And
okay if the unconscious isn't thinking. I don't necessarily have an opinion one way or the other. I'm just curious as to kind of how you kind of see it.
that's not what I was not referring to unconscious as thinking.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm not sure actually. I
But I
haven't
mean, I knew you
really.
were saying that you were saying that is thinking, the unconscious part. So that's why I was like, hey, I guess we have to kind of define
Yeah,
what we're
like but
when we say thinking, what are we saying?
before this convo, I might have thought of I kind of thought that anything that happens in my head is thinking.
Yeah. I mean, this is my opinion.
Right.
So I mean, don't,
Yeah.
um,
But I don't know for sure. This is interesting. We might have to do
anything
a
that
little.
happens in your head is thinking, perhaps. But is everything that if things happen in your head, do they happen without a symbol attached? And if they don't have a symbol attached, how do you know that they happened? Like
Mm,
whether it's a color or an image or a smell or a word.
right, because at first we were talking about just words, like thinking in words.
That's a Yeah, that's why I said like that's why I said like the colors, symbols. We turn them into symbols.
Mm. I think we must turn them into symbols in order to communicate with each other, for sure.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think that is poetry,
Hmm.
turning
Hmm.
turning maybe thoughts. Maybe we could say thoughts. Maybe we could also say notions or intimations, or turning these things into words.
Hmm.
Not
Hmm.
me, not merely just, but like because we do turn them into words, but not merely just a description. We're not turning it into a
Hmm.
mere
Hmm.
description. It's
Right,
almost
right,
that
right. Yeah.
you know the words themselves we almost use to gesture towards. It's because we could just describe our internal experience with words, but that doesn't quite capture all of poetry. We almost use the words as well.
Yeah, we use the words. I mean, that's why like even with the poems that we had, we could talk about internal they could refer to internal happenings or even external happenings. You know, we could be talking about like, the gardens are maybe thoughts, or maybe the gardens are physical habits.
Right.
Internal, external. The storms could be internal, external, right? It could be, you know, I don't know, maybe some.
Because maybe words are sort of multifaceted such that you can think in words, and you can also use words to describe your thoughts the same way a painter can use colors to sort of describe their thoughts, or a sculptor can use clay to sort of describe their thoughts. You can
Right,
you can
yeah.
you can use words to be descriptive of your thoughts, because I guess what I was saying earlier,
Hmm. Hmm.
I don't know if I'm always like, I don't know if words are always like a description of my thoughts, but I do know if I try to use words to describe my thoughts, that is poetry, you know.
Hmm.
Just as I can use colored pencils to sort of describe my imagination as well.
Hmm. Right, right. Yeah, or even a song,
Right.
even music,
Even
and that's
music.
how like, you can listen to, you know, jazz, or something that is, you know, um, some instrumental music, and yet you can still be moved by it, and you can still kind of, yeah, it brings about emotions and feelings, or because it can still be sort of, it's symbolic, right?
Right. It
It
is.
can describe the sort of, like we hear someone playing like a solo, like on the trumpet or something like that, right? Like, man, he's really, you're hearing a blues guitar player, and you can just
Right.
feel the pain, in the way he, makes the guitar, sing, Um, there's that, yeah, it's sort of that expression. It's like that, maybe that, I don't know, it's like an abstraction, or is it
Is
yeah,
weird
just
because
communication, yeah.
is it an abstraction or is it an intimation?
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess, yeah, maybe saying it's an abstraction, I mean, that's not correct. Because it is abstract what we're kind of taking
Right.
and communicating often. Um, it reminds me of that poem, Jack Kerouac. If
But
you
the
only had
breakfast,
these
the
hands,
bacon and eggs.
yeah, yeah. If you could only lay that down on a trumpet,
Right. It's like
them
if
bacon and them eggs.
the trumpet could the trumpet play bacon and eggs? Bacon and
Mm-hmm,
eggs. Some
mm-hmm.
bacon and eggs is in the mind.
Uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh.
Kerouac's
Yeah,
another
right,
one. Kerouac is
right.
he's another one, man.
We almost might have to do some Kerouac or something at some point.
We'll throw him on the list after. We've already got a
Right.
list going. We'll put Kerouac on the
Uh-huh,
list.
uh-huh, uh-huh. Right.
And
Which
I guess
remind
we
me, who is it next week? Is it it's William Carlos Williams,
William
is it?
Carlos Williams.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And so like, this we kind of wrapped up here by talking about the nature of thought. Kind
Mm-hmm.
of hard to
Mm-hmm.
kind of talk about, like, I mean, what is a thought? Are we thinking in words? Are our words describing our thoughts? And would that could still be thinking in words though?
Right. No, I mean, I think that, you can have, maybe you can describe your thoughts in words in your head, but I guess what I was kind of thinking, we think in words, or thinking in like the symbols, is that like,
Is it that we must use a symbol to make it apparent to myself?
that's what I, yes, yeah, yeah.
Like, must the symbol make it apparent to myself? Because
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because I do have thoughts that are not yet apparent to me, and maybe those can be
Yeah, yeah.
colors and words and all sorts of shit. But maybe it is the
That's where I was like, is it a thought, or is it a feeling?
yeah. That's what
Is
that
it
is
like
weird.
you know, is
It
it
might be a feeling.
because that's where I'm kind of like, there's like this unconscious part, but I feel like thinking is like bringing it into I think of thinking as bringing it into the consciousness.
Hmm.
Um,
And I and
but
I
there
and that,
are things that go on in the background beyond my thoughts, kind of to your point.
but maybe I need the symbol to make it sort of apparent to myself, that to get that distance, that reflexivity, to be
Yeah,
like, I'm
yeah.
thinking this,
Hmm.
like this
Hmm.
is what I am thinking,
Yeah,
as opposed to being,
I think, yeah.
because I don't know if we ever have thoughts like, oh, this is what I'm experiencing. I'm experiencing this. That would be a high level of mindfulness.
Well, yeah, I think, for you, because it is always like kind of like reflexive. It is always kind of like after the fact, in a way.
Mm.
Um, and because other.
This goes back to I mean, you know what I mean? This goes back
Hmm.
to
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah,
reverse
yeah,
drama.
uh-huh, uh-huh. It
So
almost always, yeah,
and this is a first. This is a verse take first. We might even going back. We're going
right.
back to another poem, but the post. This we're running a little long. We're breaking all type of rules right now, but it doesn't matter because this the reverse drama I did say, is that thinking? Is that ruminating?
Hmm. Hmm.
So maybe in order for it to be thinking, we do need the symbol so that it becomes apparent to ourselves. We need a symbol to make it apparent to us.
Right, right. Yeah, because there's that like subjective and with the subject and the object, um, which, gosh, I'm trying to remember who it was. Oh, it was with Meister Eckhart, like God is kind of where subject and object are one and meet, you know?
Mm-hmm. So
And that's what I
make
was
so
thinking, like, I was gonna say, if you're thinking like this is what I'm experiencing right now, like you almost have like the mind of God, in that
right,
in that
right.
moment, you're like, that to
It's
have
almost like
the,
a
to be the subject and the object.
or would that be the flow state? Sort of the subject and the object is like the flow state.
I mean, right? And that's like kind of saying like, hey, William Blake said the God of the Israelites was the God of poetic genius, and
He
so
did say that.
reaching that flow state, that might be the mind of God, that might be subject and object, you know, and so,
That may be
uh,
what we attempt to do with art itself.
hmm hmm right, and that's just the Holy Spirit,
K Ryan is taking us around the block. She's
right,
taking
right,
us around the
okay,
block.
yeah, yeah, Father Ryan, that here is my son, a certain kind of Eden.
I'm telling you, these poets, poetry, it crackles with a certain kind of energy. It twitches and it
hmm hmm
crackles. When you start kind of
Yeah,
getting
yeah.
close to these things, they almost demand to be expressed. You know what I
hmm
mean? There's
hmm
something that almost says there's
Yeah.
almost, and that's why don't get me wrong. I like when I was younger, especially I like the more confessional poets. But
hmm hmm
the older I get, the more poetry I read, I kind of wonder about the nature of the mind and the sort of
Yeah, yeah,
the metaphysics of the mind.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Right. It's one crying out in the wilderness, with some of these. Um,
Yeah, for sure.
and right, yeah. Uh, yeah, it is fun that um I don't even know. Poetry is just fun, Just it kind of makes you, it makes you kind of. Here's the point I was gonna make is that we could be absolute fools right now. We're just blabbering. Um, we could know we someone who is much wiser than us could tell us every which way and how we've misinterpreted these things. And I would welcome anyone in the comments to go ahead and do so. But
Please.
uh, yeah, yeah. But
Seriously, please.
right, yeah. I'm begging you if you disagree with us for the love of God, But I think that's kind of something that's great about poetry is that it does bring out such a sort of subjective interpretation of it. And that's kind of, I kind of hate when people are like, oh, it just means whatever you want it to mean. But in some ways, yeah, it kind of means whatever it means to
Right.
you, it's true. And,
It's
uh,
almost
yeah,
like the scientific method. Like
mm, mm,
you kind of want to have a hypothesis first.
yeah, yeah,
Having the hypothesis first gives your experiment credibility.
mm, mm,
So that's
mm,
kind of like with poetry. Like it might not it might not just mean whatever you want it to mean, but
mm, mm, mm,
if you can kind of back up your points,
yeah,
it kind
yeah.
of gives it a bit
Right,
more
right, yeah,
credence.
yeah. Yeah, maybe not necessarily not, whatever you want it to mean, but it can kind of mean whatever it means to you. Like you are going to relate to it in a personal way.
Right.
If you can relate to it in a personal way and you're like, hey, you know what? I haven't had this exact experience, but I've had an experience in my life that, you know, that kind of, I can relate to this. Then that's sort of, uh, it almost kind of goes into that to the poem. Something in the sky connects to something in the ground in ways we don't expect. Um,
Right.
and so maybe you just have to search for that something in the sky. I don't know. Maybe.
Mm.
I don't know if that's true or not.
I
I
don't
just
know.
said that. I just said that. I'm trying to just close up my points nice and tight, and I just, I'll just throw a little ending in there, and it doesn't always fit.
Well, post Kay Ryan, I described her as a postmodern poet.
Hmm.
So there's not going to be any nice little neat narrative for us to sort of latch onto.
Postmodern, perhaps. Yeah.
I mean, she's not going to give us anything where it's like, and everybody had lived happily ever after.
Yeah.
It's not going to be so trite, but
yeah.
But Kay Ryan, even though she does have postmodern elements, I do think she puts her money on the human spirit.
Yeah.
Or at least on humanity.
Yeah. No, I mean, hey, Kay Ryan, she's one of the greats. There's a reason why she was poet laureate.
She's great.
She's one of my favorites.
I've enjoyed reading her poetry. I have.
Yeah. No, I think she's an all timer. I'm looking forward to William Carlos Williams though. So I'm gonna dig into him.
Next week we do have William Carlos Williams, and then we have some more. But I just added Jack Kerouac
nice.
to the bottom of the list.
There we go.
So we'll see him sooner or later.
Right.
You guys.
Hey, maybe one of these days we might do a couple of our own. Remember we talked about that?
Oh yeah, maybe we'll do that like episode 20 or something. I don't know.
Let's push it back. We'll just keep pushing it back.
Well, we can do it next week for all I care.
No. I'm doing. You bring your own poems. I'm bringing something from William Carlos Williams.
I'll definitely have one from Dub C Dub for sure.
Yeah. WCW.
Wednesday night.
I got the undisputed belt right now. All right. WCW.
I'm the Intercontinental Champ.
Right, yeah. What did that even mean? I used to never know what that meant when I was a kid. I was like, okay, whatever.
They're just making up stuff, dude.
Right, yeah.
No, then it was like the Intercontinental Tag Team Championship.
Yeah, they had to have like a tag team version of like every,
right,
of all the other belts, But
yeah, hey.
Hey.
Good episode tonight, man.
Hey,
going on.
Yeah.
I don't want to go on too long. I want people to watch it.
I'm all talked out, but hey, if you want to get into conversation, smash that like, subscribe button, get in the comments, all that kind of thing.
Right.
But
elbow drop that like button.
Right, yeah. Or reach out to us on, X, formerly known as Twitter.
Right. I do have a Twitter. I haven't tweeted anything in forever. I need to tweet on there.
I don't get on there too much. I do, but I don't. I've deleted it. I bring it back. It's all. But
first take, Kay Ryan. She's great. Everything's great. Everything's fantastic.
Yeah, love her.
We're gonna bring you guys so much poetry. You're gonna be sick of poetry.
Right.
By the time we get
there. Look. And I've talked to a lot of people who, they're in this world. Okay, they know the poetry world, and even they are like, "Look, what? I guess I'm just a natural. I guess I just have a knack for it."
Right. Like
my uncle was one of the great super geniuses.
Right. And they were asking me. They were like, James. They're like, James, how do you know so much about this world? I said, I love this world.
Right.
I know. I love
it. Just comes naturally to me. I don't
know. Poetry.
Yeah.
And I'll see you guys next time.
All right.
Sign off. It's been Verse Take. I'm James.
Justin.
Take care,
and that's
guys.
all she wrote.